Hello there, Patrick Peace here, October 5th, 2020. I want to finish up my review of Chapter 3. Last video I made, I talked about how Richard Dawkins uses the metaphor of the architect and then dismisses it by saying, well, you know, there is no real architect, according to him. But I quickly got stopped again on page 33. Dawkins goes through and he talks about genes, and he introduces the term cistrons, and you know, he talks about different capabilities of the genes that they have. I'm sorry for putting my head down. I look down at my notes, and so it kind of ruins the video, but I apologize. It probably makes it harder to watch, but there might be somebody that might help from this down the road. Who knows? Even myself, I might come back, as I mentioned before, I might come back later and transcribe these videos. But he goes through and is talking about genes, and he stops us through his long wordy discussion here in the middle of page 33, and he says, you know, I prefer to think of the gene as a fundamental unit of natural selection, therefore the fundamental unit of self-interest. He calls natural selection self-interest. He interchanges the terms when he sees fit, but he says something here which is quite remarkable in the middle of chapter 3 here. It says, and I'm reading word for word, what I have done is to define, his emphasis on the word define, he puts it in italics. What I have now done is to define the gene in such a way that I cannot really help being right! Exclamation point. So he's quite excited about that. He thinks he's rather clever here. What I have now done is to define the gene in such a way that I cannot really help being right. So I got to give the guy credit that he goes ahead and explains to his audience. He tells them straight out, I'm just doing a parlor trick. I'm just doing a wordplay trick here on you. And not only that, in his immediate next sentence, at the beginning of the next paragraph, he does the very same thing. So as if to say, you want another example? Here, watch this. The first sentence on the very next paragraph starts, natural selection in its most general form means the differential survival of entities. Natural selection in its most general form is an alternative way of expressing the term creation. This is why so many people who are trying to escape from the reality of creation as they see it around them, from having any type of creator, they run away from anything to do with creator because it implies a theistic worldview, right? So so it's normal for people to latch onto that term natural selection and use that as an explanation. The entire foundation for any argument involving evolution is simple word substitution. Natural selection replaces creation. The God of the atheist is nothing beyond random chance from the elements that were created at the Big Bang. Such believers believe in nothingness, another word for natural selection, exclude the option from any intelligent creator. So their term for a creation is natural selection, and their belief is not in a creator, their belief is in nothingness, that it just created by it came to be by itself, and that's all there is to it. It's just, and then it evolved from there, right? The term natural selection replaces creation in terms of cause, and these are my notes that I'm reading to you here. The term natural selection replaces creation in terms of cause, but is synonymous with nothingness in terms of their own definition of cause. Atheists will not allow themselves to use the word creation due to the inherent implication of a creator. They use simple wordplay, that is substitution, to allow themselves the ability to support a worldview and explanation of reality without reference to God. Right? That's what he does. And not only that, he admits to his own type of definitional logic. He defines terms at will to suit how he wants to explain his version of reality. And I must admit, I missed a part earlier where he said these original replicators may actually have been crystals. That's the only time he comes up with any kind of alternate original theory. Yeah, I'll actually give him that. He did come up with an alternate original theory. He said that the original replicating units of molecular size may have actually been crystals, and he just makes that up. Here, so to give him credit, if I go back into the previous chapter, he says the account of the origin of life that I shall give is necessarily speculative by definition, since nobody was around to see what happened. There are a number of rival theories, but they all have certain features in common. The simplified account I shall give is probably not too far from the truth. He's going to give a simplified account of the origin of life, and he says it's probably not too far from truth, even though I'm just making it up because no one was around at the time. The guy is a word magician. This is what he's built his career on, right? This is why he was so excited to write this book, because he came up with an idea saying, I can just play around with words and definitions and present something that looks like it's valuable. And you read his footnotes. They're constantly referring to other people's literature and speaking in a very highbrow academic style, right? Oh, so-and-so talked about this, and so-and-so, like a bunch of kittens playing inside a paper bag amongst themselves. They're all trading ideas. And oh, and if you want to see what I thought about that, reference my book on this page, and reference the book that I wrote on that page. And, you know, oh, and I was mentioned in the Oxford Dictionary. The guy's an intellectual snob. I mean, you know, he's just tooting his own horn at every opportunity he gets. And he doesn't make any qualms about it. The rest of the chapter, and I got to admit, he has some really insightful sections where he's talking about the complexity of DNA, and especially the complexity involved when fertilization occurs. So he does have some good material in here, which is quite interesting to ponder on. He talks about DNA and the introduces the topic of sex and why sex is necessary and things like that. How would I describe it, right? It's I don't like my reading glasses. It is what is it? It's very lame, you know. I can't describe it much better than that. It's not logical, and well, of course it's logical in his mind because he's putting this together as his sequence of events, and he's just making it up. He's changing the definitions. He's explaining how DNA is so complex that it's as if there's an architect designing. Behe does a better job of explaining the complexity of the cell. In fact, I like his analogy where he says, well, if you want to explain cell replication, imagine you have a conveyor belt with all the parts of a car. You throw them on the conveyor belt, and the car assembles itself. This is the complexity and the marvel of things that occur at the cellular level. And to not see some type of unseen intelligence that's orchestrating what's going on is to deny the obvious. And so Dawkins, I feel sorry for him because he's used all his talents, all his intellectual ability to blind himself and his readers to the truth of an intelligent design. He sweeps that away and says, well, it must have happened this way. You have these things that just occur. And I could go back to chapter 1 and the simplicity of his explanation is childlike, really. And he's speaking down to a childish audience in his own mind, I can only imagine, because of the way that he speaks from a lofty academic milieu and a lofty academic environment from which he comes from, right? So he's used to speaking in this way and being rather condescending and rather pompous in how he presents his ideas. It's really a manipulation of words. It's wordplay. It's deception. It's massaging definitions to make himself sound somehow, coherent on the topic. But he's not providing any scientific data at all. He's not doing any experiments. Darwin did tons of experiments and examined tons of specimens to come up with his ideas. As I said, he was a geologist, and he took volumes and volumes of notes on different things. He studied the generations of animals that were bred in captivity, right? Like dog breeding and pigeon breeding and all those kind of things. And he took notes of what was able to change and what wasn't. And so he was able to form a general idea of how progressive changes could happen amongst a particular species or between species or what have you. But his arguing was much more based on his direct observation as compared to Dawkins, who is all simply based on his own presumptions. He just throws it out there with no backing to it whatsoever other than his own delivery. So, you know, it's pretty plain to see. I'm not an academic, and I see it just as an average person reading his book, that it's not based on anything, that it has absolutely no foundation. And so I've softened my stance towards him. I say, well, you know, the poor guy, he wrote this book, but how can I be sympathetic when he knows that it's going to deceive people? I've tried to serve him by giving him my attention and listening to him. But now, you know, there's no time for that anymore. It's time to say, well, the king's got no clothes. He's propping up a facade of an argument. It doesn't even stand on anything. But that's my opinion, of course, and I throw it out there. I invite other people to read his work and tell me what they think about it. If they think that he has this great logical foundation for why things must be as they are, go ahead and make your own video, share it, and tell me what you think. If not, that's okay too. If he never sees this video, which I doubt he ever will, then I wish the best for him, right? I don't wish any ill will on the guy, but because of the amount of impact he's had on the world, the amount of impact he's had on many people who you'll meet in casual conversation and say, oh yeah, but what about, you know, Richard Dawkins and people like that say there's no God, it's just all evolution. Well, this is why I'm digging into the material, and so that I can examine it for myself and say, no, this doesn't stand up to the instructions that were given to Moses, the explanations that were given that explain things on a grand scale and give stories and metaphors and archetypes for how human behavior is and why it is the way it is, and not trying to make it from some invisible cause without any foundation to it other than one's own presumption or one's own imagination. So I'll leave it at that. I don't know if I explained that well or not, but if it helps somebody out there who's looking at Richard Dawkins' work and wants to get a second opinion, that's my summary for the first 3 chapters. I'll try and continue and try and go faster through the remaining chapters. Thanks for watching. Take care now. Bye-bye.